Over the skies of Bethlehem appeared a star, while angels sang to lowly shepherds. 3 wise men seeking truth traveled from afar, hoping to find the child from heaven. Falling on their knees, they bowed before the humble Prince of Peace. I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. The sun cannot compare to the glory of your love. There is no shadow in your presence. No mortal man would dare to stand before your throne, before the Holy One of heaven. It's only by your blood, and it's only through your mercy, Lord, I come. I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. Sing it again. I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you. Let's sing that chorus again. I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that we sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. I bring an offering to you. I bring an offering of worship to my King. No one on earth deserves the praises that I sing. Jesus, may you receive the honor that you're due. Offering to you. Oh Lord, I bring an offering to you. I bring an offering to to you. We are kicking off a new series, one that I hope will really draw us into this thought. What do we need to do this year in order to really get Christmas right? Now, so you might better understand what I mean by that, I want you to think for a moment about other areas of our lives where we might do something and we look back on what we did, and then we say deep within, man, if I get another shot at that next time, I'm going to get it right. Our younger son took the SAT for the first time yesterday. Some of you may remember those standardized tests and when you dived into them. I don't think he has anything in him that says, next time I'm going to get it right. I think he got it right. But whenever it comes to things like SAT, ACT, I think of a buddy of mine from high school. Even if it doesn't really work, I'd love to be able to tell this story once a year just for Lauren's sake. He got into his ACT test. He read the directions very well. It said you need to color in the letter on your answer sheet preceding the correct answer. So if he determined the correct answer was D, he would color in C. Okay? Not good. I don't know what he thought when he got an A. He assumed he was wrong. Hey, smart guy, smarter than me, has gone on to do great things. But in that moment, you know what he was thinking when he got his results back. Next time, I'm going to get it right. A quarterback who overthrows a wide open receiver, a basketball player who misses just that shot that he needs to make. They're going to naturally get, as they look back, get to that point of saying, next time, if there is a next time, I'm going to get it right. I think even with parenting, we're going to have those times when maybe we have a conversation and we get done with that conversation and we look back and we go, I don't know that that went the way I would have wanted it to go. If I get another shot, if there is another conversation, next time, I'm going to get it right. That same sentiment really does apply to Christmas. And why is that? Because far too many people, and sometimes this happens to us, maybe it happens to all of us in one form every year. Far too many people get to December 26th, they get to the first of the year, and they find themselves mired in what we might call Christmas remorse, right? Some kind of silly, some kind of deep and troubling. You know what Christmas remorse can sound like. Maybe on the sillier side, it can sound like this. Why did I eat so much, right, when I said I wouldn't this year? Not just a cruise, but holidays can really reel you in, right? Why did I try to fit every activity and event into my schedule when I said I wasn't going to be running around this year? My schedule would be lighter. I was going to pick and choose. Christmas remorse. Why did I spend so much on gifts? You know, I've had trouble with that before. I said that I would kind of keep things in check, didn't do it. Why was that? Christmas remorse. Or sometimes it's just that larger question. Why did I fail once again to focus on the right things this time around when I said that I would? Christmas remorse is real. And because it is sometimes a problem for us, again, maybe every year with a few things we might run into, because Christmas remorse can be a problem for us, here's what we want to do in this series. Every week, we want to take a look at some of the things that can trip us up, some of the things that can often cause us to be remorseful. So that being our focus, we're going to start today with this: gift giving, or how we go about giving gifts this time of year. Our teachers for today are the Magi, or we think of them as the wise men. So first we turn our attention in this series to Matthew chapter 2. Listen to what we find here, starting with verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." So here are these visitors. We don't know who they were exactly. We don't know how many of them there were. As Christians, we've settled on 3. That probably is easier than buying 15 of them to set around the nativity. We don't know who they were for sure. We don't know how many there were. And yet we do know this. They were searching for the child so that they might do what? So that they might worship him. Simple as that. We were singing about that so beautifully earlier. Just to worship him. Verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time that the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and make a careful search for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." And those of you who are familiar with the story, Herod didn't want to worship him. Herod, threatened by him, wanted to do away with him. We read on now, verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshiped him. Again, that was their purpose in pursuing him, right? As we said earlier. And yet they still had one thing left to do. And that was this. They had to now engage in some gift giving. Here's the rest of verse 11 and then verse 12. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Now, one of the interesting things about a passage like this is that it can take us in so many different directions. And so here's where I want us to clearly focus today. I want us to focus on these wise men, on these magi, specifically as gift givers. And I want us to do that for this reason, because they've got a lot to teach us when it comes to how we give. Here are some biblical principles we can pull out of this passage today, 3 of them. Here's the first. First, when it comes to giving and giving well, especially giving well as a way of getting this Christmas right. First, when it comes to giving, the Magi teach us this, that always first off, we need to plan ahead. We need to plan ahead. And let me say more about that. Guys, here's one thing we know for sure when it comes to our story today. The gifts that the wise men brought to Jesus, they were not afterthoughts. The wise men didn't get to Bethlehem and think, "Oh gosh, we forgot to bring a gift. I wonder what's open, at this time, where we can go." Instead, they chose their gifts. They picked out their gifts long before they left on their journey. And what does that point us to? The importance of planning ahead. A while back, I was sitting in my office, and I had someone in my life who had done something recently for me. So grateful, significant stuff. And I started thinking, what would be just the right gift? I got to tell you, it's a way of saying thank you. I wanted to give that person a gift. And I don't know that I've ever started that early. To really think, to really dream, to really prayerfully reflect on what would be something that would bring great meaning. I could have waited till the end of the year. I could have waited probably until the first of the year. Sometimes in January would have been fine. But instead, very early, I started thinking, God, what would be just right in order to really say thank you to this person? Made all the difference. I think it brought, one never knows, but I think it brought greater meaning, a more meaningful experience for that person in their receiving. Far too often this time of year, gift giving can become, in some instances, last minute, a knee-jerk decision. That honestly can be a part of what leads some of us to a measure of Christmas remorse. And so this year, start early. It's still kind of early. This year, start early. Plan ahead and prayerfully reflect upon the gifts that you will give. And while I don't personally recommend, you got to do what you got to do. I don't personally recommend gold, frankincense, and myrrh. It can be very expensive. A lot of people aren't really looking for that. That was probably their thing. I do recommend looking at the questions you find on the insert today. Even if you're not a fill-in-the-blank person, take it home and reflect kind of under this first section, these questions that you find there. Again, as you are striving to get this Christmas right, ask yourself, what is your normal routine when it comes to gift giving or choosing what you're going to give? And how might deeper prayer and reflection when it comes to that enhance not only your own experience as a giver, but the experience of the one who will receive? Here's a second principle we find in the story of the Magi: to give and give well, especially this time of year. It's also important for us to be very intentional when it comes to our giving. And while we can go a lot of different directions with that word, intentionality, here's primarily what we're focused on with this: being intentional when it comes to who we give gifts to, when it comes to who makes it on our Christmas list, so to speak. A great place to start when it comes to that conversation, a great place to start when it comes to that kind of intentionality, is to simply ask this question: who do you want to give gifts to this year? Who do you want to give gifts to this year? Notice exactly how I asked that. I did not say to you, who do you have to give gifts to this year? And that's oftentimes where we start. Sadly enough, it's oftentimes where we finish. I think we miss out on so much joy in the midst of this season each year because our list of givees, who we're going to give to, that list is pretty much predetermined, and often it's predetermined by who we think is going to give to us. On an episode of The Big Bang a number of years ago, Sheldon Cooper, quirkiest character on the show, I loved all the heads that were nodding. This is just one of those moments that's so good this time of year, and I hope it's familiar to some of you. Penny gives him a Christmas gift. Friend gives him a Christmas gift, and he turns to her and he says this: Penny, why would you do such a thing? I know you think you're being generous, but the foundation of gift giving is reciprocity, which means you haven't given me a gift, you've given me an obligation. I now have to go out and purchase for you a gift of commensurate value and representing the same perceived level of friendship as that represented by the gift you have given me. So great. First off, related to that, please don't say that to anybody this year, okay? If someone surprises you. But then two, and more importantly, I promise you this, that wasn't how it was for the Magi. Meaning they weren't thinking, I bet Mary and Joseph plan to get us something, so we better get them something. Didn't work like that. Instead, just moved by the moment. Moved by what was blessing them. Moved by what they felt like already just relationally they'd been given. Moved by that, they simply did this, so to speak. They simply placed someone new on their gift-giving list. Guys, thinking along those lines, embracing that imagery, I want to challenge you this year to take a different approach with this than you have in years past, probably. Perhaps getting some people on your list who haven't been there before. For example, maybe someone new comes to mind because they've just been an extra special blessing to you this year. Someone you work with, a neighbor, someone you go to school with, someone you work with here at church, you're in ministry with here at church. Maybe someone like that, for the first time, comes to mind, makes it on your list. But then also think of this way, perhaps. Maybe you need to intentionally place on your list this year someone who you think might not be on anyone's list. The irony of this story, when we think of how much gift giving has become a part of how we celebrate, the irony is Jesus was not on anyone's gift list. You ever thought of that? Until the wise men come along and change that in a very holy and sacred way. Again, use the questions you find on today's insert as another way of considering what it might take for you to get this Christmas right, or to at least make it more meaningful. Use these questions to explore, to think about today, this week, what that kind of intentionality needs to look like for you. And then here's a third thing I think we can learn from the Magi today: the importance of personalizing the gifts that we give. Not always easy, not going to need to do it with everyone, you can't. But as you listen for God's voice and as you look at their example, it's important for us in many instances to think, how can I really, more than I have in the past, personalize what I give? Here's verse 11. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and they presented him with gifts. And these gifts we're going to talk about, they represent what they need to represent. They're personalized in very important ways. They opened their treasures and they presented him with gifts of gold, of incense, of myrrh. Think about the imagery here. Gold is a gift fit for a king. Incense is a gift that's often offered to, in that day, a deity, a god. Myrrh is something that primarily used to care for those who have died. When you put that all together, when you think of this Jesus, King of Kings, one with God, one who would give his life for us. When you think of who Jesus was and is, you begin to realize just how much the Magi personalized their gifts in very important ways. So ask yourself lastly, today, this week, how might you, more than perhaps you have in the past, how might you better personalize some of what you give this year? Let me just say this as we close. While I want you learning from the Magi, I think it's important to also say as we kick things off that there is one giver who rises above all givers, and that is God himself. So a couple other questions I just want you to take with you today. They're at the bottom of the insert. A couple other questions I want you to reflect on when you think of God as a giver. What does God's gift of Jesus for you, what does that tell you about God as a gift giver? And what do you need to learn from that? How do you need to live into that? Here we go. Christmas is upon us. And so as one way of perhaps staving off some Christmas remorse this year, think about who God calls you to be this year as a giver of gifts. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.